module number 1. So without any further delay, let's jump on to module number 2. In module number 2, we're going to be talking about how you can manage users, licenses, and mail contacts in Microsoft 365. So before that, let's understand the different kinds of identities that you can deal with in the Microsoft 365 environment. First is you have the cloud identity. This is an identity that is created in your Azure Active Directory. Okay. So the authentication and management of this identity happens in the Azure Active Directory, which is now also referred to as your Entra Admin Center. Okay. And as I said, the authentication and authorization will be taken care by your Azure Active Directory. Okay. So that means if I have to summarize that, the source authority of managing this identity would be Azure Active Directory, and it will have zero on-premise dependency. The other one is referred to as a synchronized identity. Okay. This is an identity that you have synchronized from your on-premise Active Directory to your Azure Active Directory. Okay. In this case, what happens is the source authority of managing this identity lies with your on-premise Active Directory, such as if you want to change any kind of, let's say, user attributes, like maybe display name, okay, or maybe like first name or something like that. You cannot make these changes from your Azure Active Directory because these attributes will be managed from your on-premise Active Directory. Okay. So the source authority for your synchronized identity is your on-premise Active Directory, while Azure Active Directory will manage some of the user attributes in the cloud, such as assigning licenses and so on. Yeah. Now, the third kind of identity is referred to as a federated identity, right? Again, in this case, your source authority of managing this identity will lie with your on-premise Active Directory, but the authentication might be handed over to some other authentication solution like ADFS, okay, which is your Active Directory Federation Services. Right. So these kind of identity model, like the synchronized identity and federated identity, can be achieved with the help of a tool called as the Azure AD Connect tool. Now, one of the main administrative tasks that you'll be performing in the Microsoft 365 environment is to create user accounts, right? And depending upon what your needs are, you can follow or you can use any of these methods to create these accounts. Okay. So you can use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, right, to create a user account, which not only allows you to create uh, user accounts individually, but you can also create bulk user accounts with the help of import multiple user option. Yeah. You can also use Windows PowerShell. For this, you have to download a module called as the MS Online module. Yeah. And then you can use commands like new-ms all user to create your user accounts. Or if you want to sync your on-premise Active Directory to your Azure Active Directory, you can use the directory synchronization method, and this can be helped with this can be achieved with the help of Azure AD Connect tool, which will automatically create identities in the cloud. Right. Now, several administrative activities that you'll be performing for these user accounts require you to assign administrative roles. setting users sign-in status, specifying users' location settings, and assigning licenses. Now, all of which again can be performed from your Microsoft 365 admin portal. You can use the Entra Admin Center to perform this action, or you can do this from PowerShell if you're managing all of these users in bulk. Right. Now, if you want to make any services available for your users in the Microsoft 365 environment, you have to make sure that you assign the license to that user account that will automatically provision the service for that account. Okay. For example, let's say I have a user named Alex who wants to use emailing services. So all I have to do is create the identity of this user in my Microsoft 365 environment and then assign Alex with the Exchange Online license. Once I do that, this service will now be available for Alex and there will be a mailbox that will be set up for him. And now Alex can start using all of the emailing services like sending emails, receiving emails, right? Maybe using calendaring services, using contacts, and so on. Yeah. And that's what you see it's mentioned over here. When you assign a license to a user, the service is automatically set up for that user without any other additional administrative activities. Now, only members of Microsoft 365 Global Administrator and User Management Administrator roles can assign or remove licenses. Right. And again, you can use either the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or Windows PowerShell to assign or remove the license. Now, the same way that you create identities in the Microsoft 365 environment, you also have an option to delete those identities if in scenarios where users leave the organization or move to a different department or a company altogether. Yeah. So in that case, you can delete that user account. Whenever you delete the user account, it goes into something called as a soft deleted state. Okay. Where that account becomes an inactive account for the next 30 days after deletion. Now, this 30-day time period allows your administrator to initiate a recovery for this account if you want to the deleted account and the associated data with it. But if you do not initiate a recovery in the next 30 days, and if the 30-day period is over, the account will be purged forever, and any data that was associated with that account will also be purged forever. Yeah. Now, one thing that you have to remember is whenever you initiate a recovery for an account, just restoring the account will not automatically restore all of the data. Once you restore an account, you have to make sure that you reassign the license to that account that will automatically initiate a recovery for all of the associated data with that account, such as the data might be like mailbox data, SharePoint data, OneDrive data, or something like that. Again, you can use your Microsoft 365 Admin Center or Windows PowerShell to perform this function. Now, when you're managing single users or maybe multiple users at a time, the Microsoft 365 Admin Center is a great place to perform this activity. But when you're performing bulk user maintenance, right, that's wherein you can use the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, which is now referred to as the Entra Admin Center. Yeah. So you can perform bulk operations like creating new user accounts, deleting existing user accounts, or restoring deleted user accounts. Yeah. Microsoft 365 provides a template, a CSV file template for each type of bulk user transaction, right? And up to 50,000 users can be bulk created in a single operation using the Entra Admin Center. Yeah. Now, the one of the important or core feature of Microsoft 365 service is it provides you with the collaboration platform, right? That allows you to uh, collaborate with people inside and outside the organization. And the way that you collaborate with people outside the organization is you add those user accounts as guest users in your organization. Yeah. But before that, you have to enable the guest user access setting, or what we call as the external collaboration settings from your Entra Admin Center. Yeah. And by default, all of your users, including guests, are allowed to invite guests outside your organization. Okay. And guest users will receive an invitation that they must redeem, and the invitations do not expire. Yeah. Now, as an administrator, you will always have an option to control permissions of these guests. That means what are the resources that they can access and what level of permission that they will have on those resources. Yeah. So you can define these permission level, same as your internal members, limited access or restricted access. Now, we also have an option of adding external contacts in your Exchange Online environment as mail contact. Yeah. So all of your recipients are automatically added into an Exchange Online address book called as a global address list. Yeah. Which is nothing but a list of all the recipients that are part of your organization. But what if you have certain contacts that are not using the same domain name or not part of your organization? What if you want them to be part of your global address list? If you want to perform this action, or if you want this service to be available to you, you can add these addresses as part of your mail contact. Yeah. So in Exchange Online, mail contacts are nothing but mail enabled objects that contain information about people who exist outside the organization. Right. So let's say I have an organization over here named Contoso. Right. Now, Contoso has some recipients that are created within it, maybe Alex at contoso.com, Megan at contoso.com, Sam at contoso.com. When they create these recipients are automatically added into the global address list, which is available for each and every user in the organization whenever they want to refer to it. Yeah. But now in this global address list, they want to add an external mail contact that is that is outside the organization, maybe something like Diego at adatum.com. So in this case, this recipient type can be added as a mail contact, which will then be available in the global address list, which can also be used to add in groups like distribution list, uh, dynamic distribution lists, and so on. Yeah. Now, again, this kind of activity can be performed using your Exchange Admin Center, or you can use the Exchange Online PowerShell to perform this activity. Yeah. Now, the permissions required to perform this activity could be recipient management role group, organization management role group, or mail recipients role. Now let's see how we can perform some of these administrative activities in the Microsoft 365 environment. So I'm going to switch to my Microsoft 365 tenant. Right. So as you guys can see, I'm in my Microsoft 365 admin portal, right? To manage my users, all I have to do is just click on users and active users. Yeah. So as you guys can see, I have a list of users that are already part of my organization right now, right? These are some dummy user accounts that I've created previously. But just to show you guys, I can create a new user account over here, right? Let's add some basic details about this user. Be John. Right. So basic details are like your first name, last name, display name, and the username that the user will be using to access all of the Microsoft 365 services. Yeah. So now in this case, I'm just going to set a password for this user instead of creating a password automatically. Right. So let me use this automated password over here. Yeah. Now, the next step is to assign the license to this user account. Okay. So I have to select whether I want to assign a license to this user account over here, right? So you can see the list of all the available subscriptions and licenses that I have. And I can choose to create a user account without the license, or I can choose to assign the license at this stage. Yeah. I want to assign the E5 license to this user and then click on next. The next process or the next step is to select whether I want to assign any kind of administrative rights to this user account so that it can perform some kind of administrative activities. Now, in this case, I'm not going to be assigning any admin role to this user account. I'm just going to create this account as a normal user account. Once done, just click on next and then click on finish adding. And now you can see this user account has been added to my directory and it is also has the necessary license assigned to it. So it has the Office 365 E5 license assigned to the user account. That means the user will be able to access all of the services, such as Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and so on. Now, let's say this user leaves the organization and is no longer required to be part of my directory. I can just click on the user account to remove the user from my organization. Click on delete user, and it will ask me whether I want to assign access to certain resources that were available with this user account. For now, I'm just going to keep all of the options unchecked and delete it. Okay, so you can see the user account is now deleted. So now if I go to the deleted users, I can see the user account that is now soft deleted. As I said, I have 30 days from the time that I've deleted this user account to initiate a recovery. If I don't initiate a recovery in the next 30 days, this account will be purged forever. And any data that was associated with this account will also be deleted. So currently, this user account is in a soft deleted state. So as I said, yeah, these are some of the basic administrative activities that you'll be performing in your organization, right? Such as creating users, assigning licenses, deleting users, and so on. So far, we have talked about the user management. Let's jump on to the next topic where we'll talk about how you can manage your groups. So let's come back over here and let's start talking about it. Now, when it comes to group management in the Microsoft 365 environment, we have 5 different kinds of groups that are supported in the Microsoft 365. Okay. Some of these groups you might be very familiar with because these are the same group types that we are using in our on-premise environment too. Okay. Such as security groups. Security groups, as you know, guys, is used for assigning bulk permissions. Yeah. So you can create a security group, maybe call it as an HR, and then add members into the security group. Let's say Alex, Sam, and Megan. And now instead of assigning permissions to these individual user account, you can assign permission directly to the security group, and all the members who are part of that group will automatically inherit permissions from that group. Yeah. So it becomes easier for you to manage users and their permissions. The other kind of group type that you can work with is called as the distribution group, or also referred to as distribution list, which is used for sending bulk emails. Eh, So you can create a distribution group, call it as sales at contoso.com. And now you can add members in this group, such as maybe Alex at contoso.com, Sam at contoso.com. And you can add a mail contact as well. This will be a recipient that is outside your organization, maybe Megan at adatum.com. So now if someone sends an email to sales at contoso.com, this email will now be redirected, or the copies of this email will now be redirected to each and individual member who is part of this distribution group. Okay. So distribution groups are used for sending bulk emails. Yeah. Now, if you want to combine the capabilities of a security group and a distribution group, you can create a mail-enabled security group. Yeah. The only difference between a mail-enabled security group and a security group is that a mail-enabled security group has an email address and a security group does not have one. Then we have dynamic distribution list or dynamic distribution group that supports dynamic membership. Okay. So what is dynamic membership? So in the distribution group, as a group owner, you would be responsible for adding and removing members. Okay. But in dynamic distribution list, that does not work like it. Okay. In dynamic distribution list, the members will be added or removed based on the dynamic query, or what we call it as rule. Okay. So members will be added based on certain user attributes that you have defined in the rule. For example, if I'm creating a dynamic distribution group like IT at contoso.com, I can create a rule like this where I can say all the users in my organization that have the department attribute set up to IT, go ahead and add them in this group. Yeah. So over here, the attribute that I'm targeting is called as the department attribute. Yeah. Similarly, you can target different attributes as well, like location, city. You can also target some custom attributes depending upon your requirement. Now, the final group type and the one that Microsoft recommends that you use it all the time is referred to as a Microsoft 365 group. Yeah. Microsoft 365 group performs all of the functionality of all the other group types that we have seen so far. So it can act like a security group. It can support the functions of dynamic membership. It can act like a mail enabled security group, distribution group, and much more. Yeah. The unique feature of Microsoft 365 group is it provides the ability for collaboration. Yeah. There are certain resources that are created with Microsoft 365 group, such as there's a shared mailbox that gets created with it. Then there's a shared calendar that is created with it, right? You also get a shared OneNote notebook. And with the help of the collaboration option, you can create teams out of it. You can create modern SharePoint team sites and much more. Yeah. So that's why Microsoft recommends wherever it's possible, you use the Microsoft 365 group as it provides you with all of the functionality of all the other group types, plus it provides you with collaboration features. Now you can use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or PowerShell to create and manage your security groups. Right? Some of the recommendation of managing the groups is to keep your naming convention simple but clear. You can create policies. There are like group expiration policies, group naming policies that will help you to govern or maintain your group. Now, the nesting of groups are also supported. So you can add users to security groups and then add those security groups to your default groups, right? So rather than adding individual users to these default groups. As I said, a lot of group types such as dynamic distribution groups and Microsoft 365 group support dynamic membership. Yeah. So organizations can create rules to determine the group membership, and rules can be created based on your user or device properties in Azure Active Directory. So when an attribute changes for a particular user or the device, the system will examine all the dynamic group rules in the organization for the membership changes. And that's why I mentioned that it will automatically add or remove users and devices if they meet the conditions or the rules that are defined in the group itself. Yeah. Now, there are some rules that you have to take in consideration when you're working with dynamic group membership. That is, you cannot add or remove a member of a dynamic group manually. That has to be done through a rule. Yeah. You can create a dynamic group for devices or users, but you can't create a rule that contains both users and devices. You can also create a device group based on the user attributes of the device owner, and device membership rules can only reference the device attributes. Now, in the Microsoft 365 environment, whenever someone creates a Microsoft 365 group, this can be created by an administrator or by an end user. Okay. So sometimes there could be confusion about how to name these groups, right? So to avoid this confusion, you can create a group naming policy. Yeah. Group naming policies allow you to add suffixes and prefixes before and after your group. You can use attributes with the values, right? Now it's recommended that you do not be very creative and allow the system allows like a maximum length of 264 characters if you want to use string attributes. And there's also an option to block certain words that cannot be used while creating Microsoft 365 groups in your organization. Yeah. For example, you can create a group naming policy like this, where you add a suffix such as maybe contoso underscore. And you can add like a prefix such as maybe an attribute called as location. Yeah. So whenever someone creates a group, let's call it as sales, these suffixes and prefixes that we have created will be added in front and after the group, such as the group name will now become contoso underscore sales underscore the location of that user. Let's say the location of the user is London. It will become the group name will be contoso underscore sales underscore London will be the Microsoft 365 group name. Now, yeah, to create these groups, either you can use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or you can use the Exchange Admin Center. But in your Exchange Admin Center, you can only create distribution groups, security groups, that is your mail enabled security group, dynamic distribution groups, and Microsoft 365 groups. Yeah. You won't have an option to create a normal security group. If you want to create one, you have to use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or enter Admin Center to create one. Yeah. Now, apart from this, we have SharePoint groups. These are restricted and only designed and recognized by your SharePoint site collections, right? So we have site owners, site members, and site visitors. Yeah, these are some examples of the SharePoint groups that gets created with every site collection. Yeah. And these groups have certain permissions assigned to them, like owner will have full permissions, member will have the edit permission, and visitors will have the read permission. Yeah. So instead of adding these members individually and defining the permissions, you can add the members into these default groups, which already have the permissions assigned to those groups. Now let's see how we can create a Microsoft 365 group using a Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So let's come back to the Microsoft 365 Admin portal. So again, guys, if you want to navigate to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, as I said, just type in admin.microsoft.com and then sign in with your global admin credentials. And you'll land up on a page that looks like this. Yeah. Now, if you want to create a Microsoft 365 group, go to Teams and Groups and click on Active Teams and Groups. Yeah. So this is where you can see you'll have an option to create different kinds of groups over here, right? I'm going to create a Microsoft 365 group. So I'll select this option. I'm going to name this group as sales and provide a small description for this group. Now, the first thing that I have to do is assign a group owner who will be responsible for maintaining membership in this group, plus managing some of the group settings. So I'm going to add a group owner over here. Let's say I'm adding Alex as a group owner. The next thing that I have to do is select the membership of this group. That means who will be the members of this Microsoft 365 group. Yeah. So I can click on the add member list and select the list of members that will be part of this group. Okay. Maybe I want Diego, Isaiah, Johnny, Lynn, and Megan to be part of this group. So I can select all of them, click on add, click on next. And this is where I have to define some of the group settings. First is I have to define the group email address. I'm going to keep it at sales at the default domain. And then I have to select the privacy of this group, whether it's public or private. As the name suggests, if I keep the privacy of the group to public, anyone and everyone who wants to join this group can join without any restrictions. If I keep it to private, the group owner will be responsible for adding and removing members from this group. So in this case, I'm going to keep it to private. And I have an option to create a team out of this Microsoft 365 group. So I can select this option over here. Okay. If I don't want a team to be associated with this Microsoft 365 group, I can keep this option unchecked. Once done, click on next and then click on create group. Okay. Now I can see the sales group is created. And if I click on close and come back to my Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you can see the sales group is now showing up over here. Yeah. So as you can see, it's very easy to create Microsoft 365 groups using the M365 Admin Center. Similarly, if you want to create the group using your PowerShell, or if you want to use Azure Active Directory Admin Center, which is now known as the Entra Admin Center, you can definitely do that too. Right. So yeah, I hope we have got a brief idea about how we can manage groups in the Microsoft 365 environment. So now let's move on to the next topic where we'll discuss how we can work with a custom domain or how we can add a custom domain in Microsoft 365. Yeah. So let's get started. Now, as we talked about it, as in when you set up a Microsoft 365 tenant, you'll be provided with a default domain name. Okay. That becomes your tenant URL, which is always your company name dot on Microsoft.com. Yeah. So if your company name is Contoso, it would become Contoso dot on Microsoft.com. Yeah. But as an organization, you have an option to add your custom domain, which will be used when you're creating usernames, when you're managing email addresses, and so on. So as an organization, I can choose to add a custom domain, maybe something like contoso.com. Yeah. So I can add multiple domains, right? And the list of the domains or the number of domains the maximum number of domains that I can add in a Microsoft 365 environment is currently 900 domains. Yeah. In which I can add like a parent domain like contoso.com and a child domain as well as a subdomain, maybe something like abc.contoso.com. Yeah. But in this case, the domain adding order will make a huge difference, because before I can add a subdomain, I have to add a parent domain. So this has to be added first, and only then I can add this subdomain. Yeah. Now, if you have purchased a domain from a DNS record hosting or a third-party DNS solution, right? You have to make sure that you have admin access to this DNS console. Okay, because you have to add certain records in your DNS domain hosting provider that will help you verify the ownership of that domain, and will also help you to provision services with that domain in the Microsoft 365 environment. Yeah. Now it's up to you whether you want to register the DNS, whether you don't want to change all of the records. And you also have to take in consideration the DNS record propagation timings, right? Because when you publish a record, it does not mean it will get published right away. Sometimes it can take up to 72 hours for these records to be published. So especially when you're performing migrations or something like that, that's wherein you can face an issue if the DNS records are not uh, instantly propagated. So you also have to plan for your DNS zone for your custom domain. Okay. So when an organization owns a DNS zone, the Microsoft 365 setup wizard, right, from where you add your domain, can create the tenant with your organization's custom domain, such as maybe adatum.com or contoso.com, like we saw in the previous example. Yeah. Now, organizations have options to either use your internal DNS zone, okay, on your internal DNS servers, so that your internal clients can resolve computer names and services. Organizations can also use an external or a public DNS zone, which will be configured on internet accessible DNS servers, so that the clients that are located on the internet can resolve computer names and services. Right. Now you can have like a third party provider like GoDaddy host the DNS zone for your custom domain. And you can also host the DNS zone on premise by using or deploying a DNS server. Right. So to add a custom domain, there are certain steps that you have to follow. Okay. So you can use the Microsoft 365 domain wizard setup, right, to add your custom domain, such as let's say I'm adding contoso.com. So as soon as I try to add the contoso.com, the first step that I have to take is to perform verification. Okay. This is where I have to verify that I'm the owner of contoso.com. Okay. And this verification can be done by adding a TXT record or an MX record or a text file in your domain hosting provider's website. Okay. So you have to add the TXT record, MX record, or the text file, or upload that text file on your domain hosting provider. Yeah. Once you've published the records, once Microsoft is able to verify the ownership of that domain, now you have to choose which services that you want to use with this domain. Okay. So you can see there are a list of various services that are available, such as if you want to use Exchange Online services with that domain, you have to add an MX record, TXT record, and a CNAME record. If you want to use Skype for Business or Team services with that domain, you have to add 2 CNAME records and 2 SRV records. If you want to use mobile device management services with your custom domain, again, you have to add 2 CNAME records for it. Yeah. So this step can be performed after you have verified the domain and verified the ownership of your domain. Yeah. Right. So yeah, that's what we discussed in the last slide. First, verify the ownership of the domain. Right. Then verify that you have administrative access to manage the DNS for that domain, because if you do not have it, you won't be able to publish records. Then verify that you can make changes to the DNS records and then sign into your Microsoft 365 Admin Center, where you'll add your custom domain and verify it. Once it is done, you can change the default domain to the new domain. And now this new domain can be used to add users, assign licenses, and you can complete your domain setup